Well, how are we doing? How are we doing on this wonderful, excellent day? This is Dr. Gregory Clarke Sr., and once again, I am thankful for you joining us here for the Comeback Conversations with Dr. Clarke. And as we're going to have a great time, you know, the monologue probably won't be as long as last week. 'Cause last week we were thinking about Mr. Nolan Wells, and it was great to hear the responses and the feedback and even the interaction in that monologue. But as we got into the great conversation and teaching dealing with human architecture and our conditioning, this week we're getting into anchors. And so, the reason why I said the monologue is not going to be long because, we have an interesting person in the White House who cannot get out of conflict. Or if he positions himself in conflict, he doesn't know how to appropriately allow himself to manifest out of it. And so, as we started to see that gas prices were starting to come down and starting to move towards a particular expression, all of a sudden he got to open up his mouth. And next thing you know, the prices are starting to go back up again. Why? Because the alleged ceasefire, which to me was really a pause. Everyone who has some level of common sense can see that it was a pause. But, now that the ceasefire is not here, now that we're going back and forth about international waters, and I mean, it's just a hot mess. But in the long run and in the long term, what we're doing here at the Comeback Collective Circle, the Triple C, is just to recognize how we are establishing ourselves to allow ourselves to go beyond the fray. We're not going to let for anything when it comes to things that can pull us into negativity for us to wallow there. We're here to stay established, we're here to grow, and we're here to recognize that things are going to happen. Life is going to happen. But if we can appropriately navigate with life, we start to see how things start to appropriately move coordinatedly and forward. So, once again, we appreciate all of you who are here at this time. So, I know that Ms. Johnson is the co-host. Let me greet Dr. Cheryl Clarke because I see she's in the building as well. Hello, Dr. Cheryl. How are we doing? Can we see some face? Let's see if we can see some caricature, some face. Let's see. Let's see if she's going to bless us with her image as we wait and wait and wait and wait.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, no face, just a picture.
God bless you, Dr. Clark.
I'm messing with her. I'm messing with her. Amen. Amen. Mr. Sampson, as always, great to hear and see you. I don't know if he's coming to us from JA or if he made it back home safely, but I guess he'll let us know. Oh, it looks like he made it back home. How did everything go with the family? We did send our prayers out to the family because I know y'all were going through your respective times. How did that go? Oh, we can't hear you because he's sharing some great stuff, but we just can't hear.
There
There,
we
there
there
we
we go. I was saying that everything went well, praise God, and we got back safely yesterday. So no major glitches. The family was very excited to see one another. So through death came life, and it was a blessing. But we made it. We made it, and Deb's okay, thank God. And thank you guys so much for your prayers.
No problem, no problem, no problem. Dr. Shaw, anything before we move on? Just want to make
Well,
sure.
they know that we're going to be seeing them soon, so
That's
we
right.
have we have they know we sent out their prayers and all. So, my brother and my sister, we love you guys immensely.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Because we love
Miss,
you guys.
amen. Miss Johnson, how's been your week? Were you too? Did you get an opportunity to hang out in Yankee Stadium any this past weekend or anything? Or you just stayed up there in that section of your section? Did you hang out with some final innings or anything like that?
Is the 14th of July, 2026 a significant day for you? Because you seem to be choosing violence.
Okay.
I did not attend the Jay-Z concert
Okay.
because I'm fiscally responsible,
Oh, okay.
and that is not my area of preference, if you will. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Now, if it was at City
Mhm.
Field, I might have peeked my head in, but
You know
no, thank you.
what? So you don't went out to Queens instead of being in your home borough.
Absolutely. I'm
Oh,
bougie. Thank you very much.
okay, okay. Well, you had Nas there. He represented with the strawberry. He had the Mets gear on, for night one. So you'd have felt connected.
Yes, but he also received a stipend, which I would not have received. So I did not attend.
Okay. Well, 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 well. And Mr. Richards coming to us from the Great Martin of St. Martin. How are you today, sir?
Well,
Okay, your audio is going in and out already.
yeah, there was a 14th of July.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like a big day on the French side because
Mm.
actually they had the World Cup with France and
Yeah.
Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Spain beat them 2-0.
Ooh. So the French side wasn't happy.
You don't know.
Okay. So with that being said, we're gonna segue right into tonight's teaching because I know the French side boy, they're probably hopefully they're not burning stuff, but they're not some happy campers at this time. So as we start to recognize, you know, always keep okay, let's remove that. That's right. Let's remove that. And as always, our wonderful co-host between Miss Nicole and okay, thank you. Let's see. Gotta remember everything's in retrograde stuff. Are we cooking with good gas, Miss Nicole?
Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So once again, this week and for this respective teaching, we're dealing with anchors, the invisible forces that shape identity. Now, for some of you, some of the members of the circle, um, what would you consider an anchor in your life? Before we really jump into it, to see what would you consider an anchor? Do you consider something that a ship deals with, or what would you consider an anchor in your life? And I would begin. I would say anchor in my life at times could be Dr. Cheryl. And the reason why I would call her anchor because she is someone that I can lean on, though I know at times I'm her stabilizing force, but at times she can be my stabilizing force. And so I would consider her an anchor. And that could be an invisible force because it's not that she's doing anything tangibly to say physically, but when you have that anchor is not necessarily physical. So I would consider for myself as an example, Dr. Cheryl Clarke as an anchor. Anyone else out there that would consider what would you consider an anchor to be in your experience?
Well, I'll go next. I would consider God as my anchor, my
Mm,
faith, because if I had to look at it deeply, um, it came over time consistently. God will never fail me. Where man will fail, but God will never fail me. So I'm understanding that God is my anchor, and then I will consider you as the second part of the anchor of understanding of a stabilizer, and I'm complete.
excellent. Miss Johnson, what anchors our City Field resident?
Well, okay, we'll use that. Environment can be an anchor. It can
Mhm.
be a positive or a negative anchor. You could let your environment influence how you think, talk, believe. So that could go either positive or negative. Culture can also be an anchor. It can
Mm,
kind of stabilize you when you're not quite sure what to do. you can fall back on culture to say, okay, this is what I know works best, so I will stick in that regime. And I'm complete.
Excellent. Anything from Mr. Sampson or Mr. Richards before we move on? Amen.
The
Go
only
ahead.
thing I could think of would be my faith.
Mm,
Everything else, like was mentioned, can fail you, but I always know that with the unseen, that there's an entity that will see me through whatever I'm experiencing. So it would definitely have to be my faith is my only anchor I could think of.
excellent. Anything from Mr. Richards before we move on?
And then you then you look at a foundation, right? How strong is the foundation? Because you have to have a foundation that you're building off of, to have a strong house. So the foundation you look at is where you could rely on, you could fall back on, and know that there will be no damage. And I'm complete.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So let's move on. Okay, what is an anchor? An anchor is anything consistently associated with an emotional, mental, or behavioral state. Anchors can form intentionally or unintentionally. And some of the great examples that some of the circle has shared, and we can reiterate right here, we can say music can be an anchor. Sometimes what we smell, you know, going through certain houses, and all of a sudden you smell that food, and all of a sudden that can bring you back. It can anchor you into a space and a place. And that moves on to the third one, places. Like we get the opportunity to travel. And sometimes if you go to a particular area more than once, there's a reason for that. Because maybe that very first time you went was such a great anchor that you desired to say, okay, I'm going to go here again or go here again. Symbols, which goes back to what she might be a doctor one day. What Miss Johnson was sharing about those symbols can come from our cultural dispensations. Symbols could be good, and certain symbols may not be so good. Certain symbols that we may see that could be presented to us could be about minimizing us. And then you have to make the choice to say if you're going to utilize that as an anchor. And I know last week when we were talking about human architecture and conditioning, and we were being mindful of the fact that so many people had Michelangelo's cousin up on their wall, and that was a symbol. That symbol became an anchor because people started to behold and think, okay, this is the form that we can, respect as the deity, which truly is a symbol that is not necessarily the one that should be. That we recognize that is not the true image or even the true likeness of what was represented from that region. So certain symbols as an anchor could also be detrimental. And some of our routines, some of the things that we go about our space of creating a lifestyle, being habitual within, those routines are anchors. You have to have your coffee at this particular time, this particular space. You need to smell that cup of coffee. It's not a bad thing. That's a routine. That routine is an anchor. And your words. And see, this to me is sometimes runs along with rituals, which are the most powerful ones, because at times we don't understand that our very words could be what we're being doing to be detrimental to ourselves as an anchor. When we start to focus on the I can't, or I won't be able to, or that's not in my thing, or anything that looks like it's a not or a negative. And I'm not talking about as a negativity as a vibration, just the fact of the matter is that the subconscious state cannot tell a joke. The subconscious state can't look at it and says, oh, the conscious self was just playing. When they said, I can't do this and can't do that, cancel, cancel. And all of a sudden the subconscious starts saying, well, okay, we're going to download that and we're going to make sure you can't do it. And it starts from your words. It starts with what you're out picturing. And those rituals, as we were talking about, especially when it comes to our faith, those respective rituals that we allow ourselves to go through and to experience become definitive anchors. And even we're going through a season now where, you know, people could be having the same construct or structure, but have different different possibilities of how they're navigating it. There's a difference between Pentecost alone, Pentecost, Pentecostals. I don't know why I couldn't say that word, but there's a difference between Pentecostals, especially Black Pentecostals, and even white evangelicals. And then we can look at Baptists and Methodists and this, that, and the third. Now they all have their respective rituals, but those rituals, some are declinated over time and moved in a particular space, and some we sometimes just accept and say, "Oh, this is just what we do." And sometimes some of those rituals may not be necessarily good for us because we say, "Oh, this is just what we do." It says, did we give ourselves the space to question or even open up and expand the possibility about some of these certain rituals? Any thoughts from anyone before we move on to the next slide?
Well, if I may have to say, if you would like a comment here, I think it starts with awareness of what you talked about before last week. When you talked about awareness, it starts with awareness. Sometimes anchors are maybe unintentional. They're learned, like you said, and creating new anchors is important for us to become in a space of understanding, shaping new thoughts, and getting control of our emotions and things that happen. So I think like the smells, the music, and all those things, we grew up in environments that shaped anchors. And then being aware that we're anchored in something that's not even supporting us today is something that we definitely need to be aware of and shifting anchors. And I'm complete.
Excellent. Anyone else before we move on? Excellent. Everyday anchors. Think about experiences such as Ms. Johnson. If you can read the first one.
A song that reminds you of a season of life.
Do you have one? Any songs that remind you of a season of life?
Thinking of one particular, I had a job at 16, my first adult job where I worked in an office, and they used to play disco music. So whenever I think of disco music, I think of being back at that job, having fun as a 16-year-old, starting to experience life. And I'm complete.
Excellent. Dr. Cheryl, can you read the third one? I mean, the second one.
Oh, okay. A hymn that evokes reverence.
What kind of anchor does that lay for you? What's a hymn that evokes reverence?
Oh my goodness. I would say a refuge temple. Bishop Bonner will always come up and say, "This is my story. This is my song." So anytime I hear that hymn, it's like every single time it just anchored me and put us right back. You know, you getting ready to hear that hymn, it takes you right back to that. So, yes, to my childhood in church.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Mr. Sampson, can you read the third one, please?
Yes. The smell of familiar cooking that brings comfort.
Okay, Mr. Sampson, what?
And you know I'm going to talk about that pressure cooker oxtail pot. Yeah, man. If I come in the house and I smell that, I'm in good shape.
Okay, okay. I'll read the fourth one, a sports jersey that inspires loyalty. Of course, my Yankees jersey. I mean, as much as I'm a New York Giants fan, and that's probably my second favorite team, but you can do no justice without a New York Yankee fitted and a good old pinstripes for the 27 times world champion New York Yankees. Okay, I just had to say it like that. And Mr. Richards, can you read the fifth one, please?
A flag, a flag that evolves a national identity.
What would you say to that one?
Well, everybody carries a flag nowadays, especially like you have the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's into, sports. So it's like, which teams are going to come up on top? So you're looking at sportsmanship, and you're looking for, good good, like say, players that will not harass other players, but will play a game that is tactical and
Mhm.
complete.
Excellent. And these illustrate how associations can become emotionally meaningful. And the reason why this is so great to hear different members of the circle sharing their thoughts, because at times we have to recognize everyone has the right to their anchors, even intentionally or unintentionally. And as we spoke about that earlier, certain things can be based upon just proximity. And like, I may be joking with Miss Johnson, but Miss Johnson has every right to be a New York Mets fan. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. She's still a New York fan. It's just that she doesn't like the Yankees. We're not going to make that a thing. I mean, oh my God, because you don't. No, stop. That's her anchor. And when you can respect that anchor, then people should be able to respect yours. And so our different associations, or even how that we came to the space or to the probability that we arrived at those anchors, is also part of the process. So there's nothing wrong, and all those respective experiences and anchors were great because that gives you your identity. You're not meant to be a copy. You're meant to be the biggest and greatest expression of who you are meant to be. And if you're doing that, then everything else is going to work itself for you in the long term. Okay, positive versus negative anchors. Okay, I'm going to ask Ms. Johnson to read the positive, and then I will read the negative.
Okay. Positive anchors: encouragement, gratitude, confidence, purpose, resilience.
Now, when you hear those words, Ms. Johnson, does it just evoke positivity, or do you have to do anything with that?
Funnily enough, I have to anchor it to something else for it to become real. Because otherwise, it's just a word on a piece of paper.
Very true. Very true. Dr. Shaw, what would you say to that? Because I know with the work that you do, especially with women, and especially after you wrote your great book, Girl You Cute, and every Tuesday morning, she shares live on YouTube on her channel, Speak Your Power Now. So definitely, go check her out each and every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But what would you say to this, as you always are building anchors or having those conversations about developing the boys?
I would have to agree with Nicole with this because once you look at this, it's not a positive or a negative thing. It's what we attach to it, the emotional association with it. And when we attach it, then it becomes a negative or a positive because the places and phases and things that we have gone through and that we have to begin to do those things. So when she just read that, we have to look at ourselves and be encouragement. Oh, I never got encouraged. You can turn that positive word of encouragement into a negative. Encouragement. Oh, I never got encouraged. That's turning that encouragement word into a negative because of your experience with the word. So, how we experience something really does anchor us in understanding who we are. And then it can turn into some of the pain, the fear, the shame, and all that stuff. So that's what I have to say to this piece in regards to that, Dr. Clark.
Well, so let me read the negative anchors now: fear, shame, avoidance, anxiety, and limiting beliefs. Now, I desire to play devil's advocate to what my wife, Dr. Cheryl Clarke, just said. So, is fear the other side of encouragement, or because someone was encouraged, that means that they can turn encouragement into a negative, Dr. Cheryl?
Sorry. So, yeah, so this is actually good because fear is not the opposite of encouragement.
Mhm.
It is what someone says. So, encouragement is an experience, how you experienced encouragement, how the behavior of that. Fear is an emotional state. Shame is an emotional state. Avoidance is an emotional state. Anxiety is what happens. The behaviors of encouragement, what is it that I experience, and the behaviors associated with that thing. So those things on the other side of negative anchors is not the opposite, but it's operating in that state of mind. And that's what I would have to say to that.
Excellent. We see Mr. Sampson has his hand raised. Go ahead, Mr. Sampson.
Yes, just in listening to the previous statements, fear, yeah, bring that up for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, fear can actually be a good thing
Mm.
because certain things you need to be scared of in order not to put yourself in danger. Shame, if you're doing something you know you shouldn't be, could be a good thing. Avoiding taking drugs, avoiding going into certain strip clubs, doing things you shouldn't be doing, could be a good thing, could be a good anchor. Um, Limiting beliefs in a lot of Christianity, they want you to limit your beliefs. Believe nothing but nothing outside of the word is no anything outside of the word is no good. Limit your belief. You know what I'm saying? So that brings me back to the point of yes, you definitely have to have an attachment to something because there's duality in just about everything. And I'm complete.
Excellent. It's interesting. Like if I utilize what Dr. Cheryl start, and it's not making her thought wrong. This is by having the healthy debate. So that means I can look at gratitude as even gratitude can be considered a negative, or maybe because I have confidence is people think assuming, and I'm going to come to you, Ms. Johnson, and people are assuming that my confidence is arrogance, or if I'm purposeful in my path, that means people think I'm bougie because I'm attempting to act like something else. Or if I have a certain level of resiliency because I don't get broken down because certain things may happen in other people and it may not necessarily happen in me. So on the flip side, could the positive anchors as relating back to what Dr. Cheryl alluded to be considered not necessarily positive? And Ms. Johnson, the floor is yours.
Um, hmm.
Hmm.
That last question threw me off. I didn't like it very much.
Go ahead,
Um,
go ahead, come
no,
on.
because my initial thought was going from Dr. Cheryl's explanation. So positive anchors would be action and negative anchors would be emotion. Dr. Cheryl, is that a correct assessment or am I a little off?
No, I think that you're absolutely what I'm saying, and it's not right or wrong. But what I'm saying is it's upon interpretation for each people. So let me get that clear. So depending on the person and your association with the words, this is where you may tend to have that anchor, what Dr. Clarke was talking about. Confidence maybe being a positive anchor for someone, but someone that perceives confidence as what you said, arrogance, that's their own experience of them seeing someone with confidence, and they're perceiving it as that person is arrogant. It's someone's own interpretation of what that looks like. So I would say that, Nicole, I hope I answered that because you said it was versus emotion. Did you say that? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
action versus emotion.
Yeah, so either one could actions act you saying that if the positive anchor is action versus emotion.
Yeah, that's the meaning my brain gave to the words.
Yeah, so yeah, you can do that. You can say it that way. I'm just saying in effect of it's interpretation. If you could look at interpretation, so maybe someone never felt as though let me just give like Dr. Clarke was talking about confidence. So if no one ever established what confidence was, and Dr. Clarke stands in confidence, and then someone is being shamed. And this is the negative part of I'm not saying the negative, but the avenue of the association of the emotion coming with the shame. Someone shamed them for being with confidence. So then they turned confidence into being arrogant. So then, therefore, I can never even stand in my confidence anymore because I may be shamed. So then that's the factor. It's a reactive emotion to what has happened to them. Does that make sense?
I mean, it does. So essentially, 1,000 people will have 1,000 different associations or anchors to these words. So
Hmm.
it's whatever, based on your life experience, gives the definition of what it is. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Because the
Dr.
only
Clark.
reason, no, the only reason why I'm bringing it up is a great debate, and I'm loving the fact, and that's some of the things that we stimulate here in the circle is about. It's not about being right or wrong. We're not looking for a positive or a negative per se, but what it is that too many times, especially in our Black and Brown communities, we don't have these relevant conversations about some of the things that even that we perceive to be our anchors or our rituals or our semblance. Mr. Sampson was bringing about the limiting beliefs. There were certain things that was colonized our faith or started to allow ourselves to be in a space where some of our cultural acumen that was part of our spirituality was considered negative. And you come to find out, some of the stuff that some of those, generations back in the days were doing, it's like now all of a sudden they found out the different ingredients, and now all of a sudden they trying to attempting to give you that as a pill. So it's like, wait a minute, you attempted to limit my belief about what my forefathers and foremothers did, and then now all of a sudden you find that that same stuff that they were able to find in wherever the respective area they found the root or the basis point of what it is, and now all of a sudden now you're attempting to resell it to me as this. And so I can understand where Miss Johnson is coming from, because at times when we stand in our confidence, and I can bring that back to my own personal story. I remember growing up in the Bronx, being able to go to the, I would say, decent high schools, District 9 in New York City, and then eventually going to Brooklyn Tech. There were times that even people in our neighborhood would look at some of us, or some of us who made it, to go to some of these respective campuses of learning. Oh, y'all trying to be like white people, or are you trying to do this? And it was like, wait a minute. It was almost like a pushback. Like, I thought you would desire for us to move and become smarter. So as we were invoking our confidence, there were people who were attempting to minimize our confidence. Now we had to make a choice, and I know I had to make a choice to say, am I going to listen to what they say, or am I going to believe in myself? And so even when we're dealing with peer influences or peer pressure, we still have a personal responsibility. And sometimes that wasn't necessarily galvanized in our community to recognize, like, wait a minute, don't question God. Not that you're questioning God, but God gives you the ability to say, ask something if you don't understand. Don't just sit there and just keep doing something in a ritualized space without saying, like, wait a minute, why are we doing this? And that's why sometimes you can respect other communities where there are certain times out of the year, even the children can sit there and ask, the eldest of the family, be like, yo, why do we do this? Why do we do that? So I can have an understanding. And so at times, what we may perceive as anchors, regardless if you feel that they're positive or negative, they can be utilized. And you can make a choice to say, when we look at some of the things that I have listed under negative anchors, like limiting beliefs, I don't deal with limiting beliefs. I recognize who I serve, who I know my spirituality is connected to, is still ever expansive. So for me to move in a limited space, to me, is negating what I believe. It becomes a double entendre, and that doesn't make any sense. But these are some of the things that we are very much conditioned to and end up being anchored in. And then we start to recognize, as I said in the statement on the bottom, part of personal growth involves recognizing which anchors influence us. And it's not to make anxiety wrong. Anxiety is not wrong. Anxiety is a space that it is what it is. Now, I know if I go from a spiritual standpoint, it says, do not be anxious for anything. So why am I moving anxiously if I was part of my guide, belief, and rule tells me that I shouldn't be anxious for anything? So sometimes we have to look at our respective conditioning, probably as we look at nature versus nurture, we can see those things that may have been applied upon us. And then after a while, we have to make the distinction and the difference within ourselves to say, am I going to accept that as who I am or what I am, or I'm going to recognize that I'm going to do something else? Any thoughts by anyone? This is a great conversation. Any thoughts? Anything from you, Dr. Shah?
Yeah, I will say this. Um, there are some of us that have not had that school of thought in regards to how we can begin to be anchored in certain things because a lot of people have been raised with limiting thoughts. And because if you're not anchored in certain things that we have conversations with, I know in my household, um, I couldn't I couldn't say what I believed without getting popped in my mouth. So for conversations that are deciding, this is where I see where just a debate about is it positive or negative? I think it becomes an awareness of the interpretation, especially in the brown and black home in the communities, that we didn't always have the luxury to have a conversation even in our homes. So the beliefs became and the rituals and all that other stuff and the messages that we were shaped in, now that we can see that, oh, don't be disrespectful. And you were raised in a space of, say what you think, Greg, it's okay, you can do that. And you weren't punished for it. You was able to do that. And in some households, we were not able to do that. And, you had the privilege to be able to, do that. But in some interpretations of that, the anchor is children, exactly, as Ernest, what Prophet Samson's put in there, children are to be seen and not heard. And we had to relearn that. So now we're in spaces where some of us do have limiting beliefs. I didn't become, my value didn't become until I became into the spaces where I went into higher education to understand it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be with other cultures and to be able to say that. So it's not for me when I get into these spaces, it's not a positive or a negative. It's just this, what it is. And now I have to be aware of how I can shift it so I can be with other conversations and I'm complete.
Excellent. 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 And I appreciate the debate that was stimulated by this slide because it gives us an opportunity to recognize, like I said before, it's not about who's right or who's wrong. But when you start to hear and articulate, and that's why being in the ability to articulate your thoughts and to be in conversation, you start to allow yourself not so much to be influenced, but to recognize that what is the pattern of your speech or what is the thing that may have been ritualized in your words that now you have the ability to articulate and see, you know, does it work for you or it doesn't work for you? And it's okay if it doesn't work for you, because then you have the ability of choice to say, wait a minute, I'm going to change this. You're not stuck. You're not pigeon-toed to say, wait a minute, because we keep doing this like this is how we're going to do it. Now, if that's what you choose to do, now it's not necessarily you being stuck, because now you're making a conscionable choice. And sometimes we even have to recognize that with some of our anchors. Some of our anchors are choice. And if you don't like it, choose ye this day. Choose another way. Choose another day. Choose another part that you can do. If you think something that you're avoiding, which is true, you can avoid certain things, but as you continue to self-stimulate yourself and speak that life and speak into that space where you develop, we're going to come to you, Dr. Clarke. When you allow yourself to speak yourself into that space, then all of a sudden those things that may have been things that were negative can start be rooted out, because remember, the subconscious mind does not take a joke. And there are times the greatest person that you have to speak to, and I know my wife does mirror work, especially with the women, the greatest person you have to speak to is yourself. Because if you're not going to generate that space out of you, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's your mother, grandmother, husband, spouse, wife, whomever. They can't do it for you. They can be a part of what you're doing, but they can't do it for you. Yes, Dr. Sharp.
I'm gonna say this in my opinion of working with the mirror method and how many times they got to do it over and over and over again, because sometimes they didn't even think they had a choice. And sometimes they stay in relationships that demean them. Sometimes they don't feel like they have to stay in an unfulfilling position because that's all they have, and I think that's all they have. And sometimes it just takes somebody to continue to pour into them, and spaces like this to say there is something there is choice. We all have choice. And I'm complete.
Excellent, excellent. That's a great segue to cement this particular slide. Okay, creating intentional anchors. Examples include your daily reflection, your gratitude practices, and affirmations. Dr. Shaw, what would you say to that? And that goes back to what you're saying about the mirror effort. Is daily reflections and affirmations appropriate or positive?
Yes, but they're not enough, because you can do that. That works. But, in understanding what you do, the declaration, like I do that every morning, but the declaration and the affirmations is not enough. It's not